Okay, so first of all, thanks for the invitation to speak today. I have to say that my imposter syndrome flared up a little bit when I saw the agenda and all the smart people with titles like Chief Data Scientist and others that indicate they might know what they're talking about. But I'm going to talk about my experience the last 12 months since we started MyBank, creating the business intelligence platform. MyBank is a new challenger bank in Norway, focused on the consumer finance market. I'm a little bit unusual for a bank CFO in that I'm originally a political scientist, and then I spent 12 years doing complex derivatives for investment banks in London. And then I moved to Norway to work in risk management for a savings bank and to go skiing with my wife and kids, which is unusual. Now, in order to talk about a business intelligence platform, I'm going to say a little bit about the underlying business of the business intelligence platform. MyBank is essentially an automated deposit-taking and loan application processing machine. So we take in loan applications from a web platform, either our own web platform or our distribution agents' platforms. We process the applications with as close to zero manual intervention as we can. Currently, our record for time between loan application received and funds released to the customer is 48 seconds. And that includes the time that the customer needed to digitally sign the documents using Bank ID, the Norwegian version of Bank ID. So it's a no-hands sort of setup. The core idea behind the business is also something that guides our other outsourcing processes. So we, unlike other banks, don't have an in-house sales force. We don't do our own distribution. We do no paid advertising. We don't even do paid search advertising. It's all just SEO. We think that the distribution agents are the best at distributing. You know, they're paid on a commission basis. They're experts at what they do. And so we leave the distribution to them. This comes back in our other business process outsourcing. We outsource the things to the people who do the things best. That's the basic idea. We are only 8 employees, so in order to do this outsourcing, we tend to try to choose as few partners as possible, because otherwise we get a huge cloud of people that we have to deal with. And so one of the consequences of this is that we chose a core banking system from a company called SDC. A lovely bunch of people in Denmark. They have 110 mostly small and some medium Nordic banks for customers. And they provide us with a full banking system. It's a core banking system, the accounting part, the regulatory reporting, the internet bank, the mobile bank, everything in one place, including an enterprise data warehouse, which they're very proud of, which runs on Teradata, unsurprisingly. Now, this had some advantages, choosing a kind of off-the-shelf bank from a single provider. It was extremely fast. So our time to market from the time that we signed the contract with the banking system at the end of November, it was a week after we did our share issue, took 4 months. And that's a month before we'd set up the kind of shell of the bank, and then another 3 months until the first deposits and the first loans were made. I don't think anyone else has done anything close to that fast, certainly in the Nordic market. Like I mentioned, they provide us with a comprehensive platform. I don't have to buy in almost anything else from anybody else, which is an advantage, obviously, with a small company. Because they already operate in the Nordic markets, I'm confident that they're fully compliant. I've worked as a risk and compliance officer, and I didn't want to have any headaches and kind of, waking nights worrying about whether I was reporting the correct things to the regulator. It's a very quick way to stop running a bank, is to screw up your compliance. SDC is also very competitively priced. There aren't a lot of choices for banking software, but they were, I won't say how good, but they were very good. The issue perhaps with choosing a legacy kind of old school provider was, and this is very important for the topic of my talk, which is the business intelligence platform, which is that SDC is a company that runs banking software for small savings banks mostly. They are very good at running the system. They are not so good at being development focused. And so when we came to develop our automated workflow with them, this caused some issues. So like every lazy student and presenter, I've gone to Wikipedia to find the definition of business intelligence. And Wikipedia calls it the technologies and strategies used by enterprises to provide historical, current, and predictive data analysis. And so I saw some people here who built my previous data warehouse, the nice people from Sherpa. I've been a very happy Tableau user in the past. And so my naive startup CFO idea was that we would have this great self-service BI platform where I could slice and dice and drill and play with my data, and I would get lots of actionable insights and everything would be great. I'd be like some sort of BI ninja. So the reality hasn't been quite that. The reality has been that I have reacquainted myself with Microsoft Access, which I used, 15 years ago, because the spreadsheets started getting too big, and so I couldn't use them for my pivot tables anymore. I have sharpened up my R coding skills to merge data sets that Excel and Access couldn't do anymore. That was interesting. We have waited, I've waited months and months for things that probably should have been part of the basic spec from day one. Some poor expectations management on our part there. Mostly though, what we found in the beginning stages is that we lacked visibility of some of our most important business processes, especially the application process. Now, the way I describe our bank is we're essentially a machine for turning applications into money. Money for the customer and money for the bank. And at several stages during the process, this machine was lacking a lot of the gauges and little meters that told you what was happening inside the machine. And we knew how many thousands of applications were coming in, and we knew how many loans were coming out, but we weren't able to say anything about our pricing. We weren't able to say much about the credit quality that was coming through. We could only tell that in retrospect. Obviously, and I should emphasize that at no point were we blind in the sense of not having our regulatory requirements. I mean, we knew how the bank was running. But in terms of being able to set pricing and be smarter about this, we had a long way to go. And we spent a lot of time wrangling data manually to the point where it wasn't that useful by the time we'd finished wrangling it, because it was data from a week ago. And in the process of sorting this out, I encountered a lot of fun questions and responses. Like, why can't you just use business objects? Everybody else uses business objects, and it comes with your core banking system. Well, no. We had questions like, oh, you wanted the workflow data in your data warehouse? Well, I'm sorry, the workflow people don't send anything to the data warehouse, so you can't do that. We were told that Unfortunately, you can't have all of the application data in your data warehouse because we've set up our Teradata to truncate everything at 4,000 characters. So half of the XML disappears and you can't parse it. That's a fun one. Yeah, those are the most interesting questions we received. So I think essentially the problem was that an old school banking system provider has an old school view of what is business intelligence, what data is required, and how should it be presented. They're not really into the business of supporting agile business decisions. So one of the things I learned is that my expectations as a startup CFO were very different from what they had. And the analogy that I've used is, if I go to John Deere, the tractor manufacturer, and I tell them, hey, I'd like a Tesla Model S, they're not going to turn around and make me a Model S. It doesn't work. They're very good at making tractors, and if I want to plow my field, then that's where I should go. But there's an expectations mismatch there. The other thing I learned is that the data and business intelligence needs of a startup bank are very different from the needs of a steady state bank. I mean, I came from a savings bank that was growing 10% a year, and at times we have grown 5% a day. So it's obvious that the requirements that we have are different from what other steady state banks have. It's a little bit like vital signs. If you're a patient in intensive care, your vital signs need to be monitored constantly. Whereas if you're a healthy and fit person, you can probably get away with stepping on the bathroom scale about once a month. I also learned that this is something that we should have had expert help on from day one. Because we were expecting that our off-the-shelf solution would give us the things that we wanted. And the off-the-shelf solution gives a lot of what we need, but was impossible to take it those last 4 or 5 steps to what we actually needed. Smaller, kind of minor things. I've also figured out that you can pretty much ignore the front end. It doesn't really matter what you hook onto the front. I've been a very happy Tableau user before, but to be honest, the new data connectors and kind of power pivot functions in Excel are so good that the front end is not really the big deal. The whole visualization thing, not really something to worry about. I also learned a bit late, but we learned that you need to build as many big pipes as you need to take every bit of data out from the core system and put it in a place where you can work with it. And that is the bit that in my experience, has taken a lot of time. Now, some of you might say, well, doesn't it just sound like you guys did a bad job of picking your banking system? Shouldn't you guys have bought something, more fancy from the start? But as with everything else, it's not that simple. There are not a lot of banking system providers in the Nordic market. The core function, business intelligence is a pretty core function. But in a banking system, the core function is keeping track of the money, taking the money and sending it to the customer or getting it from the customer. If it doesn't do that well, or if it costs you a lot of money to get it to do that, then that doesn't really help. When you create a banking system, you have to hook it up to the clearing system, which is different for every country. You have to hook it up to the credit scoring agencies. You have to hook it up to the digital authentication and signature systems. All of these things, all of these integrations are prohibitively expensive for a small bank like ours to do. And this is why we chose an off-the-shelf solution. I recently spoke to the CFO of another challenger bank in Norway, They're in a slightly different market, but he told me they had chosen a new API-based kind of seemingly fancier banking system. And he was having a little bit of a struggle hooking it up to the 17 different providers that he had to connect using APIs. So I don't want to be in that situation, and I wish him the best of luck. So what did we do? Well, we got hold of some nice people called BI builders. They're not very imaginative in naming their company, but this is what they do. They have a tool called Expert BI, which I know is a sort of automated ETL tool. I don't really know more about it than that, and I don't really care as a user. The CFO in me likes that it was quick, and so it was cheap. We have currently on this project spent about as much as the first iteration of my previous data warehouse project cost. So the CFO in me likes this. This is good. We have, or when I say we, so BI Builders has also helped us with some of the basic, obviously creating a self-service reporting setup. We have a data mart that all of our users hook up to, and it's easy, everybody knows how to do it. We're only 8 employees, so it wasn't that hard to do the training. And obviously, because I'm a CFO and I have other CFO-like things to do, like annual reports and audits and investor presentations and that sort of thing, they've also set up some of the kind of ready-made reports for us. So with a few caveats, I'm now pretty much the happy stock photo guy looking at reports. This is me. And if it isn't me by the end of a few weeks, I'm sending BI Builders an invoice for the talk. The final thing that I would say, and I mentioned this earlier, but when you're creating business intelligence platforms or systems for a bank, the thing to remember is that bankers love Excel. Spreadsheets. This is what we do. This is in our blood. And actually, Excel can do a lot of things now if you just hook it up to the right backend. So if I was going to say one thing, it's please leave me to play with my Excel. And that's all I had to say today. Thank you for listening. And I don't know.